I'm Michael Pauley, and this is Faith in Politics. On this broadcast, we range from the soul to the state as we cultivate those virtues and explore those principles that help us live well as faithful Catholics in this great land. Well, again, it is a beautiful fall day. I am here in the studio in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, away from my normal base in Rapid City. And as we record this broadcast, it's late October, and the election is coming up very soon. But I'm going to do something unorthodox today, and we're not going to talk about the 2022 election, but we're actually going to talk about something that may be coming up for the 2024 election. And if you think I'm really jumping the gun, you'll think otherwise when you hear how important this potential issue is that we may be facing in 2024. So with that little teaser to hook you, I want to introduce my guest for this program, and that is State Representative John Hanson. John, welcome.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
So Representative Hanson is from Del Rapids and represents District 25 and is the Speaker Pro Tem in the State House of Representatives. And, I know obviously a lot of our listeners who live in or near your district probably already know your story, but we have a statewide audience. So just for folks who may not know you too well, just tell us a little bit about your background and then maybe also what inspired you to run for the State House of Representatives.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm John. I'm married to Sheila, my wife. We've been married for quite a few years now. We've got 5 kids.
Awesome.
They're all 11 and under, so it's a very busy house
Awesome.
at the Hanson House in Del Rapids, where we live. Great little community. We love our home. It's just awesome. So, I got into politics. I suppose it goes way back to when I was just growing up as a kid. And every morning when I'd wake up, my parents would have the news on. And so when I'd wake up, rather than watching cartoons or whatever, I'd always watch, it happened to be Good Morning America. And so every morning I would wake up and watch Good Morning America. And I think something about that just sort of started something in motion, kind of got my interest peaked in current events. And of course, the news covers politics all the time. And so from there, my interest in politics really took hold about the same time as my conversion. I converted to Catholicism. And around the same time, I just started to sort of look a little bit more outward rather than a little more inward.
Yeah. What year did you come into the faith?
Well, I was late high school.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was pretty young
when
I converted. And so about that time, I just started to really seek the Lord's will in my life and ask the Lord, what do you want of me, God? You know, and that sort of caused me to look to our culture and our politics and really inspired me to action.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love the fact that when I asked you the question, this is very telling, that the first thing you said was that you're a husband and a father. And, okay, I'm going to insert an editorial comment that here's a politician who has his priorities straight, when the first thing he says is that I'm a husband and a father. And I'm married and have 2 young girls. Well, they're actually not so young anymore, ages 9 and 12. And that is, I always keep that in the forefront of my mind, that first and foremost, that is who I am. I am a husband and a father, and everything else we do somehow ties into that service to the Lord and service to the family.
Amen to that, man.
If you get those priorities straight, then you can make a lot of other mistakes and be forgiven. I was looking at your some biographical information on you on the web, and it said that you are also a avid musician. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I love playing music. My whole family is pretty musical.
Okay.
And so I think it just comes from being around other musicians in the family.
Yeah.
And so, I've done everything from, sing a lot at Mass and do praise and worship and stuff like that, to playing shows around the area and restaurants and stuff like that.
Guitar, piano?
Yeah, guitar, piano, singing, a little bit of everything.
Okay,
bass guitar, harmonica.
Cool.
The sky's the limit. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. I play piano, but that's it. I'm a one-trick pony when it comes to music. So
we could jam. You take the piano, I'll do the guitar.
All right. Yeah. Good deal. Well, I want to kind of segue into the topic that we have, which is a serious one. As a legislator, you've long been involved in efforts to pass pro-life legislation in South Dakota. And we've got some really terrific laws that are thanks to the Dobbs decision that came down on June 24th. Praise God, South Dakota is now a place where we actually have legal protection for preborn children. And what a hard-won battle that took us nearly half a century to get to this point. However, there is a risk that this all could be undone because of a proposed amendment to the South Dakota Constitution. So to kick us off here, give us sort of the 30,000-foot overview of this amendment. Who's behind it? What is it proposed to do? And when might South Dakotans see this on a ballot?
Yeah, so right now, pro-abortion groups in our state, primarily being led by an organization called Dakotans for Health, which, not to get down a rabbit hole, but just to make the point, abortion, it's not medicine, it's not healthcare. That's said a lot, and every time I hear it, it just kind of bothers me. Medicine cures, it treats. Yeah. Abortion terminates the life of a whole separate, unique, living human being. It actually, the doctor is terminating the life of one of their patients,
right,
in an abortion. So abortion is not healthcare. Nonetheless, this organization is called Dakotans for Health, and they're leading an effort to amend our state constitution to legalize abortion all the way up to the point of birth. But it's even more radical than that, because not only does it legalize abortion to the point of birth, it would also override all of our existing, pro-life, common sense, bipartisan abortion regulations. So it truly is radical, and it's not an overstatement to say that everything that the pro-life movement has fought for to defend life over all these years is really on the line. If we lose this, we lose all those protections.
Wow, and I recall you in an earlier conversation making the point that to kind of underscore how extreme this is that if this amendment were to pass, then our situation would actually be worse than what we had in South Dakota before the Dobbs decision came down. So it's not like just taking things back to the way they were on June 23rd, 2022, the day before Dobbs was handed down. It's actually making far more profound changes than that.
Again, it's not an overstatement to say that if this measure were to pass, it would be better if Roe were not overturned and we still had our laws that we had in place.
Which sounds crazy,
right?
But that's the reality,
right? Even simple things like prohibitions on taxpayer funding of abortions.
Yeah,
things that we all agree to for the most part.
Right.
If this constitutional amendment were to pass, those things are out the window. You can't have those anymore. It overrides that. So those things that we were able to have in place under Roe versus Wade would be gone.
Yeah.
If this amendment becomes put into our Constitution.
Yeah. So this amendment first surfaced a couple of months ago. We first became aware of it during the summer. And the sponsors, as is provided by the law, submitted their proposal to the Attorney General. And under South Dakota statute, the Attorney General is supposed to draft a title and a explanation for the ballot measure. And this is more than a bureaucratic exercise, because the title and the descriptive language prepared by the Attorney General is actually what goes into the ballot, that voters have in front of them. And so this language is critically important. There was some controversy surrounding the Attorney General's first draft of this. Can you kind of share with our listeners the gist of what happened there?
The first explanation and title that were drafted by the Attorney General really were insufficient for a couple of different reasons. Primarily because the first explanation said something to the effect of, this is a constitutional amendment to set a regulatory framework for abortion.
Yeah.
So not only was it not descript, but that actually is the opposite of what this is really doing.
Yeah.
We have a regulatory framework
Yeah.
for abortion in our state right now. This amendment would override most of that framework.
Right.
And so there were a couple more reasons why it was insufficient. So a bunch of organizations submitted comments to the Attorney General's office, and fortunately, the Attorney General did amend his explanation.
Yeah.
So the way that the explanation is written today is better.
Yeah.
It's probably not how I would have written it. It's probably not how you would have written it.
Yeah.
But it's better than what it was, and we're grateful for that. And like you said, it is very important because that's what the voters are going to read on their ballot before they cast their vote. And so it's really critical that that sets forth really what the amendment would do.
Right.
And so fortunately, the work of the organizations who submitted those comments, they paid off to some extent, and we got a better explanation, a more fair explanation.
Yeah, and one of those efforts was a joint letter signed by a whole number of legislators that I believe you organized that effort, correct?
Yeah, I helped to organize that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this is kind of I guess you could say, a little micro lesson in the fact that when we make a noise, sometimes it leads to good results. And so the first title that the Attorney General had for this amendment was a constitutional amendment concerning the regulation of abortion, which, if you didn't know anything else about it and somebody put a petition in front of you and said, hey, here's a constitutional amendment concerning the regulation of abortion, somebody who's pro-life could sign that thing because I want to regulate abortion, you know. And so so a whole bunch of legislators and pro-life organizations, as you said, did weigh in on this. And so the title was changed, and so now the title is a constitutional amendment that creates I'm sorry, I was scrambling for my paperwork here. It's an initiated amendment establishing a right to abortion in the state constitution. Yeah. So that's a much better title in terms of explaining to people what this actually does. And the explanatory language also was I would say, a considerable improvement. And so that just was a real. I felt very strongly looking at that language that. Again, we don't know whether this thing will ultimately be on the ballot, but if it is on the ballot, this language alone, could make the difference between victory and defeat, in a close battle. And so that was really rewarding that we got a much better title and explanation. So I want to just focus on, even though the title and the explanation from the Attorney General is now much clearer, that doesn't mean that we're out of the woods yet in terms of people describing this thing inaccurately, right? So what kind of misinformation do you expect to be coming down the pike on this measure?
Well, I recall one time I was sitting in Del Rapids at a restaurant called Papa's on Main Street. Great place. Sadly, there's no more Papa's. It's closed. I miss it dearly. I love that place. Maybe someday it'll come back. But I was sitting at Papa's having lunch, and I saw a guy out the window with a clipboard. And he's just walking by. I'm like, oh, I bet you that's a petition circulator. And so I finished up my lunch, and I walked outside, and sure enough, he was standing on the corner. So I went up to that guy, me being curious about these sorts of things.
Sure.
I went up to him, and I said, hey, what do you have? And I kind of suspected I knew what he was circulating, but I just thought I'd ask him, what do you got there?
Yeah.
And his response was, I'm trying to help the farmers and put hemp on the ballot. Well, and I said, is that all this amendment does? And he says, well, it deals with all of cannabis. It deals with all of cannabis. Well, what it really was the Amendment A petition from a couple of years ago that legalized recreational marijuana.
Oh, my goodness.
And I heard that from all sorts of people. It wasn't just my own experience.
Yeah.
And it's not just on this amendment either.
Yeah.
But I heard it before, not that long ago, actually, not that long after that experience, I had another person approach me. And he said, hey, I was down at the courthouse in Sioux Falls, and I signed the hemp petition. I'm like, no, you didn't, buddy. That was the recreational marijuana petition. It's like, what? I had no idea. And so that's what they do. I mean, sadly, they're just not honest.
Yeah.
Some of them I'm sure are fine. They're good. They're
Yeah.
they just want to change the law. Whatever. It's okay. That's their right to do so.
Right.
But in my experience, and in others' experience, what we know is that oftentimes these circulators aren't honest. And, they only have a minute just to capture whoever's walking by them.
Right.
And so they'll say anything just to get their attention, to try to get their signature on their petition. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
And that's a problem for this, too, because we cannot sit back and expect their petition circulators to tell the public about how radical this thing is.
Right.
They won't tell people that this is going to legalize abortion all the
Yeah.
way through 9 months. They're not going to tell people that this is going to override our existing common sense bipartisan abortion regulations.
Right.
They're just not going to do it.
Right.
And that's a big problem.
Yeah. Well, and I don't even think that we can count on them necessarily to say that, this is an amendment concerning abortion. They may cloak it in some kind of euphemism like the ones we've seen over the years that, this is an initiative to protect reproductive freedom,
Right. Yep.
Or this is an initiative that's going to prevent government from interfering with private healthcare decisions.
Absolutely.
There's any number of ways that that you can spin this thing, which is, kind of getting back to the all-important title of this thing. If you're walking into a post office or a grocery store or other place and you see petition circulators, you need to look at the title. Make them show you the title and the explanatory language.
Yes.
And if at the top you see the title, now I've misplaced it again, a constitutional amendment establishing a right to abortion in the state constitution. If it says that at the top, then understand that this is an effort that's going to, give South Dakota, radical abortion laws that are far worse than what we had before the Dobbs decision came down. So I want to talk about, speaking of spin and how the proponents of this thing are advertising it. If you go to the Dakotans for Health website, which I've done a number of times, and that, again, as Representative Hansen said, is the sponsoring organization behind this effort, they describe this as an effort to codify Roe versus Wade in the state constitution. Is that what this amendment really does, or is something different going on here?
Well, yeah, no, it's not. I mean, as we discussed earlier, you think about those existing regulations that we have put in place. So parental notifications, for instance. If a minor is going to go seek an abortion, we have those laws in South Dakota. This would override that. We were able to have that law under Roe versus Wade. We wouldn't be able to have it under this constitutional amendment.
Right.
We had informed consent laws. We do today. They're not being used because we don't have any abortions taking place, praise God, in South Dakota. But those informed consent laws came from what was happening at Planned Parenthoods in our state and all over the country. Planned Parenthood just wasn't fully informing mothers about the consequences of an abortion procedure. They would say things like, we're just going to empty the uterine contents.
Sure.
That's just a cluster of cells that we're, disposing of. When the reality is that abortion procedure is terminating the life of that mother's baby. It's terminating a whole separate, unique, living human being.
Right.
And so the state of South Dakota passed some requirements to make sure that these abortionists were fully informing mothers. We had those.
And they saved lives.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Those laws have saved countless lives. I mean, really, it's been amazing. We had those even with Roe versus Wade. If this constitutional amendment were passed, it would override all those. We wouldn't be able to have those anymore. So those sorts of things. Even, a couple years ago, we passed a law in the state of South Dakota banning Down syndrome abortion bans. Before that, sex selection abortion bans. Can't have those. Those are all out the window. Those bills passed the legislature with bipartisan support. I don't know there's a single no vote on our Down syndrome abortion ban, but this constitutional amendment would override all of that.
Wow. Well, let's for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking with State Representative John Hansen, and we're talking about a proposed amendment to add a right to abortion to the South Dakota state constitution. So what I want to do now is kind of maybe get into the weeds a little bit on this thing and actually walk through the text of this amendment, because it's not that long, and the amendment does bear some superficial resemblance to Roe versus Wade, in the sense that it talks about trimesters of pregnancy, and that was how the Roe v. Wade decision was structured. Was it divided pregnancy up into trimesters? And interestingly enough, the Supreme Court in the Planned Parenthood versus Casey decision threw out the trimester framework as unworkable. So again, even the pro-abortion court in Planned Parenthood versus Casey said the trimester structure makes no sense at all. It does.
Right.
It's unworkable. Nevertheless, this amendment imposes that unworkable standard into the South Dakota state constitution. So maybe just kind of walk through the amendment for our listeners and tell them how it's structured.
Sure. And by the way, that the Casey decision came down in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And so, as you indicated, part of Dakotans for Health attempt is to say this is just codifying Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
But they're attempting, even what they're purporting to codify hasn't been the law of the land for decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like you said, the Supreme Court long ago said, no, we're overthrowing that. I mean,
That's right.
the trimester framework has been thrown out for decades now.
Exactly.
Now they want to go back to it. But it's not just going back to it. It's far more radical than that. So yeah, just to walk through it, the first paragraph, it's very short. The first paragraph, before the end of the first trimester, the state may not regulate a pregnant woman's abortion decision and its effectuation, which must be left to the judgment of the pregnant woman. And so right there, just in looking at this first trimester, there you can see where it says the state may not regulate a pregnant woman's abortion decision and its effectuation. So that's what we're talking about when we say all of these common sense regulations are out the window.
Yeah.
Just completely gone. And as we know, most abortions take place in the first trimester.
Yeah.
And so any common sense abortion regulation is gone under this.
Well, and I'm, granted, I suppose this is a point that lawyers will argue about further down the line. I'm not an attorney, but I have practiced public policy for better part of 30 years. And when I look at the phraseology, the state may not regulate a pregnant woman's abortion decision and its effectuation, that's so broad that, in other words, there's no exceptions. There's no asterisks there. There's no footnote that says,
Right.
Except in the following circumstances. It's saying no regulation whatsoever. So when I look at this, I don't even think a statute that says that abortion would have to be performed by a licensed physician would be upheld as constitutional, because if you say, only a doctor can perform an abortion, by my reading, that's regulating the effectuation of someone's decision, and the Constitution has just said you can't do that. So I mean, this is
right.
this, the whole. I think about the old slogan of the pro-choice movement used to be. Abortion is a matter between a woman and her doctor. Well, apparently not anymore.
Right.
Maybe we don't need medical professionals involved at all. But anyway, let me have you continue with the rest of it.
Well, further evidence of that, of exactly what you're saying, is that the second paragraph here is, after the end of the first trimester and until the end of the second trimester, the state may regulate the pregnant woman's abortion decision and its effectuation only in ways that are reasonably related to the physical health of the pregnant woman. And so when you think about regulations making sure that a doctor is performing the abortion, well, that to me relates to the physical health of the mother, the protection of the mother. These are risky procedures that it shouldn't just be left at home or without some doctor. And so yeah, I think you're right. I mean, they provide for that exception in this second paragraph. That means in the first paragraph, there cannot be that regulation, even to provide for the presence of a doctor when performing an abortion. And, you can only speculate as to why.
Right.
Maybe it has to do with the fact that they just want telemedicine, internet abortions
right.
To occur outside of any doctor-patient relationship. Who knows?
Right.
But it truly is radical.
Yeah. Well, I want to. There's a lot more about this amendment that I want to get to with you, John. But we are coming up. We just have a few minutes left in the portion of our broadcast for our radio listening audience. And so, before we reach our time limit there, I want to give you a chance to talk about an effort that you have founded to try to combat this amendment. Because even though this amendment would not be on the ballot until 2024, the process for gathering signatures is starting, basically now. So tell us about what you've done to try to push back on this.
Yeah, so I, along with Leslie Unruh, who's a longtime pro-life advocate in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, started what's called the Life Defense Fund. And so the Life Defense Fund is an organization that's really going to lead the effort, primarily just to inform the public.
Yeah.
Abortion up to birth, that's not who we are.
Right.
That's not us. And I truly believe that if the public knows that that's what that petition is, they won't support it. They won't sign it. But it's up to us just to let them know.
Right. Right.
And so that's why we've created the Life Defense Fund. And so we're going to do all sorts of things to try to make sure that the citizens of the state of South Dakota know that this is radical. It's not who we are. And let's not even put it on the ballot.
Yeah.
Don't sign that petition because it's just that extreme. It's too extreme for the state of South Dakota. So Life Defense Fund is the organization. The website is lifedefensefund.com. You can sign up to help volunteer, really just spread the message, make sure that our fellow citizens know that this is radical and that the petition should not be signed.
Okay. And you said again that website is
lifedefensefund.com.
Lifedefensefund.com. Okay. Yep. And is that a website currently set up to take donations?
Absolutely.
Okay, so people can contribute. And we don't typically hawk political causes here on Faith and Politics, but there have been these ballot measure fights on abortion in other states, and what listeners need to realize is that the abortion industry is well heeled. They have a ton of money that they can pour into states like they recently did in the state of Kansas, which had a huge battle over abortion. So unfortunately, we have only pro-life citizens to fight off their misinformation. So if please do check out that website, and there's a place, I believe, where you can sign up to receive updates, right?
Yep. Sign up, volunteer. If you would, donate to the cause. That money is just going to go to spread the word and to try to stop this radical constitutional amendment.
Awesome. Well, we're going to continue the conversation with Representative Hansen, but for our radio listening audience, that's all the time we have. Until next time, live well. All right, and we're continuing on for our the chosen lucky few who subscribe to the podcast. You get the unabridged version. So, because we were running short of time for the radio portion of our broadcast, I kind of cut you off in your description of the abortion amendment. So, as we were talking about, this is broken down on a trimester basis, and you talked about what happens in the first trimester and the second trimester, but there's more, folks. There's also a provision about what's allowed in the third trimester of pregnancy. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so the third paragraph, which is the regulation, or the portion of the amendment that would regulate the third trimester, says that at the end of the second trimester, the state may regulate or prohibit abortion, except when abortion is necessary in the medical judgment of the woman's physician to preserve the life or health of the pregnant woman. And so, having been around legislation and legislative language and constitutional language for a long time, the big problem with that is that there's no definition. And that's intentional.
Yeah.
And it's intentional on their part. So when you think about the health of a pregnant woman, the health of a pregnant mother, without definition, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Does it mean anxiety? Does it mean depression? It certainly could.
Yeah.
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 I mean, your wife's been pregnant. My wife's been pregnant.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of anxiety. And this is not to minimize this. Anxiety and depression
are real.
That's a real thing.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And I don't think we should minimize those things.
Right.
And so without proper definition,
yeah,
I think it just blows the door wide open.
Yeah.
And I think that they're doing that very intentionally.
Yeah.
To allow for abortion all the way to the point of birth, which is exactly what this would do.
Yeah. And there's, as you alluded to, there's a reason why well-written statutes have crystal clear definitions, because in the absence of having clear definitions, you'll pardon this, I'm going to tell a lawyer joke, but if you put 10 lawyers in a room and ask them to define what the term health means, you're going to come up with 11 different opinions.
Yeah, that's right.
And so this ends up being a thing where, okay, so the people vote on it, but then what it actually means ends up getting decided by unelected people who wear black robes.
Yes.
You know,
which at this point is particularly crazy, considering, the Roe versus Wade being overturned. The judges said that we're returning this authority to the people.
Yeah.
And their representatives.
Yeah.
Which is exactly where it should have been the whole time. I mean, Roe was obviously very
Yeah.
wrongly decided. There's no constitutional right
Yeah.
to an abortion in our federal constitution. And this is a question
Yeah.
that was properly returned to the people. And yet, if we were to enact a constitutional amendment like this, it's just going to throw it over to more unelected judges to make these decisions for us,
Right.
rather than the people making the decision for the people.
Right. Right.
It's just a very bad idea.
Yeah, and just one other thought on this language here that talks about third trimester abortions is that it, even though it doesn't actually give a meaning for the word health, if you read it in the broader context, it says the state may regulate or prohibit abortion except when abortion is necessary in the medical judgment of the woman's physician to preserve the life or health of the pregnant woman. And that really makes me think about the fact that if this were to become law, become part of our Constitution, and it goes to court, I think what we really need to fear is that a judge might say that it doesn't matter what anybody's definition of health is. The plain language of the amendment grants the physician the sole discretion to discern what health means. So what does health means? The court could say doesn't matter what we think it means. The clear language says that judgment will be made by the woman's physician and no other person. Well, in this case, the woman's physician is an individual who is actually getting paid to perform this procedure. Right. So it's just really shocking that there's no, there's not even a veneer here of an attempt to kind of provide some precautions or sideboards. And so, I don't want to put words into your mouth here, but effectively, is it a fair reading of this amendment to say that if you can find a doctor willing to do it, this amendment guarantees legal abortion from the moment of conception to the moment of birth?
100%.
Yeah.
And, as you indicated, and as we've seen over the decades since Planned Parenthood has been in business, their motive is a profit motive.
Yeah.
They're in the business of aborting babies. And so if you go, you read that and you think, okay, well, it's like a family doc or something like that. No, it's not. It's an abortionist who is getting paid to perform an abortion.
Yeah.
And that's why they're there. That's what they're in the business of doing, and it's how they make their money.
Right.
And so if you ask that abortionist, hey, does this woman need an abortion because it's in the best interest of her health, let's just say.
Right.
You better believe that Planned Parenthood abortionist is going to say, yeah, let's do the abortion.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what will happen.
Yeah. Well, I want to ask a couple of questions that maybe can clear up some misunderstandings that maybe some listeners might have about the political process. So, this amendment, they have to gather tens of thousands of signatures. Can you kind of share a little bit about the process of getting an amendment like this on the ballot?
Yeah, so they're at the point now where on November 5th, which is just a few short days from when we're recording this, they can start circulating their petitions. So they've gone through all the process from getting the language to the AG's office and the Legislative Research Council and all that to the point where now they've got the petition. They can start circulating on November 5th.
Yeah.
They've got 1 year to circulate their petition, and they're going to need just over probably 30,000 signatures. That amount is based on how many people vote in this upcoming gubernatorial race. And so we don't know exactly how many signatures they're going to need right now, but it's going to be approximately probably 33, maybe 35,000 signatures or something like that.
Because it's based on 10%, right, of the votes cast in the gubernatorial election.
Yep, exactly right.
Okay. Yeah. And that kind of puts a exclamation point on what I commented at the opening of our show today, which is why in the world are we talking about something that, if it gets on the ballot at all, won't be decided until 2024? And the answer is because the issue is live right now. I mean, people are going to be circulating these petitions. By the time this broadcast is aired, they will have already collected a certain number of signatures. And so the process of educating people has to begin right now in late 2022 for an amendment that we won't see until 2024.
And I think that's a real question that pro-lifers need to ask ourselves, which is, what's our response?
Yeah.
We know that these circulators are going to be on our streets circulating these petitions. And so what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
And I don't think our answer should be nothing.
Yeah.
Just sit around and let them do it. I think we really need to make a concerted effort to inform the citizens to make sure that they truly know this is crazy, this is radical, it's abortion up to birth, it's not who we are.
Yeah.
Don't sign that petition.
Yeah. Well, I want to address one potential misconception that people may have. I suspect there may be some people listening to us today who are saying, but wait, this is South Dakota. We have a governor who proclaimed that one of her goals was to be the most pro-life governor in the entire United States of America. And we have a legislature that where we have solid pro-life majorities in the legislature. So can't our pro-life governor and our pro-life legislature just block this effort?
Right. The answer is no. And the reason why is because this is a constitutional amendment. So the people can change the Constitution, and that's the only way.
Yeah.
You can do that. The legislature could refer a question to the people to vote on.
Right.
And you can do it through petition circulation. But the reality is only the people can amend the Constitution. So even as simply as like trying to go in and define those terms in this constitutional amendment, say the legislature said, okay, this is an undefined health exception in this amendment.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go in as a legislature and purport to define what health means. Can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What we say has no bearing on what the Constitution says.
Yeah.
And so really, if this is in our law, the legislature, the governor, there's nothing you can do about it. The only way to change it is to change the Constitution.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that people need to bear in mind, is that there really isn't much in the way of a checks and balances here at all. The people are the owners, if you will, of the state constitution. And if a majority of them were to vote to place this into our constitution, God forbid, that's it. The governor can't undo that. The legislature can't directly undo that. As you mentioned, the legislature can propose an amendment to the voters, but assuming this passed in 2024, the earliest that could happen would be for 2026. And so the reality is that we need to stop this thing from being approved in 2024.
Right.
So I want to just, before we wrap things up here, just one more time, the organization again is
Life Defense Fund. You can find out a lot more information at lifedefensefund.com. And now is the time. Now is the time to organize, to volunteer, to donate. If we wait till a year and a half from now, until the campaigns are really kicking up, it's too late.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
This is far too important just to sit by and do nothing.
Yeah.
So we really need to step up as a people, as a state, as a church. We need to step up and we need to act.
Yeah.
To make sure that this does not become part of our South Dakota Constitution. We're a pro-life people. We're a pro-life state. We need to keep it that way.
Amen to that. Amen. Well, they have to gather over 30,000 signatures, as you said. And I guess a final thought maybe that I'd like to leave with our listeners is that of that 30,000 signatures, if even 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 of those signatures are pro-life people who signed it just because they were unaware of what the amendment actually does, then that would be tragic, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we absolutely have to start educating people about this, if for no other reason, just to try to dissuade as many people as possible from signing it, out of some sense of confusion that it's a measure about privacy or stopping government from interfering in women's personal decisions. There's going to be all sorts of euphemisms that are used to describe this, and if we can educate people about what it's really going to do, then I think we have a chance of making that signature gathering effort difficult. So,
yeah. And by the way, that is one of their go-to points. They will routinely say, these circulators, they'll routinely say, hey, this isn't you supporting it. Yeah. This is just putting it on the ballot so that the people can vote.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the reality is that's you helping them take that next step to putting this into our state constitution.
Yeah.
So we don't want to do that.
Absolutely. Well, in addition to the Life Defense Fund, the South Dakota Catholic Conference is going to be monitoring this issue. We're shortly, within the next couple of weeks, I expect we'll be putting out an analysis document that can be used to help educate people. So be on the lookout for that. If you want to receive updates, not only on this abortion amendment, but on other crucial issues that the Catholic Conference is tracking in the legislature and in public policy, please visit our website. It is sdcatholicconference.org. And if you look at the top menu bar, there's a little place where it says sign up. Please, if you're not already on it, sign up so you can receive updates on this crucial issue. That is all the time we have today. John Hansen, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, thank you. It's great being with you.
And until next time, live well.